Hey, Merrick. Hello?
Hey, hope you can hear me. We'll give it a few minutes. Hey, bye. Yeah, Alexei. We'll give it a few minutes for people to join, and then we'll run through the agenda.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes. Hey, Simon, how's it going?
Hey,
I see a few other folks on here. Hey, Marek. Hey, Sam, Dennis. Just give it a few minutes for people to join.
No worries.
I just installed Zoom fresh a minute ago. Wanted to make sure that it all worked.
Okay. Yeah, make sure you can share your screen.
Oh, that's a good call too. Is it working?
Yep, all good.
Yep.
All right. Technical problems out of the way. Time for a flawless demo.
You just jinxed it.
I'm manifesting it. By the way, nice to meet you, Merrick.
Nice to meet you.
All right, let's get started. Let me just share my screen. So hopefully all you can see the agenda. So the first thing is always, so welcome to the community call for November for FireFly. As you might have known, we've joined obviously the Linux Foundation, Decentralized Trust, which was the name from Hyperledger into this new Decentralized Trust Linux Foundation. And there are antitrust policies that we need to follow. And this meeting is recorded. So if you don't obey through these policies or you don't want this meeting to be recorded, please feel free to leave now. And today in the agenda, just three things I wanted to say, a little bit about Maintainer Days updates. We're gonna have a demo from folks on the Cardano connector that I'm really excited about. I think it's been in the pipeline for a while, it's good. And then so many other topics that the community members want to raise. So last month, there was a meeting for the maintainers as part of the member summit that was hosted by the Linux Foundation Centralized Trust. So I had the chance to be there in person. There was some really good discussions around how to improve the community in terms of Discord engagements, in terms of getting support from the Linux team and the centralized team, from Rai, from folks like that, that really been helping us out. One of the main things that's come out from that is, as part of moving to Linux Foundation's decentralized trust, we're going to be moving the FireFly project under a complete different organization. So today, if you go to GitHub, you go to github.com/hyperledger/FireFly. They've decided that in order to better maintain and manage each project, we're going to move under a different organization as a whole, which will be part of the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. It's a mouthful, so I'm just going to say LFDT. And we'll have our own organization. So things like we contribute new code and everything will be its own organization from FireFly. Apart from that, there was some really good collaboration on how can we do more webinars and workshops and events, and how we can start showcasing more things in FireFly and collaborating with other projects in the ecosystem, because obviously there's a lot of projects involved in this LFDT, and how we can bridge gaps and look at the ecosystem as a whole and see how we can, work together more and not be in different silos or projects. So if anyone have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, or if you have any things that you'd like to know and know more about these maintainer days when they come up. I think this is the first one they've done in a while, but normally I think they're going to try and do them every year moving forwards. And then after that, there was the member summit, which was for the members of the trust. Just there's different talks and panelists around all the DLT technologies. Any questions on the maintainer days? Okay. So next up is the Cardano connector. I assume, Simon, you're gonna do the demo
Simon's
today?
gonna share his screen, and I'm gonna talk through it.
Okay, go for it. All yours.
Yeah. So I'm sure everybody on this call already has a bunch of context, but just in case this recording gets clipped and shared, I'm going to give a little bit of background about what this is about. So FireFly is a project under the Hyperledger Foundation that seeks to provide a enterprise kind of programming interface for blockchain technologies. The hope and the idea is that a big company, some big payroll processor or some big, finance company can interact with blockchains and leverage some of the best practices, like dealing with rollbacks and dealing with like key safety, and not have to worry about those details, and can just build their application logic. It, to various extents, also tries to hide specific implementation details about the underlying blockchain itself, though that's not always possible because different blockchains behave differently. So, sometimes you have to fall back to, okay, we're going to have to write some Cardano specific code or some Ethereum specific code, but at the very least, all of the things I mentioned before, the key security, the dealing with persistent snapshots and rollbacks and things like that are handled by the FireFly infrastructure. Cardano is a blockchain. It is kind of what I consider it one of the big four or the big three: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Solana. And it focuses a lot on peer review research and efficiency of its proof of stake consensus. So what we've been building out in kind of conjunction with Blockfrost, who is a kind of infrastructure services provider on Cardano, is all of the kind of pieces you need to plug Cardano into that FireFly ecosystem. So today we're going to be demoing the first and most basic components of that, the ability to build, sign, and submit transactions and respond to chain events. And then after that demo, I'll talk a bit about where we go from here. So Simon, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did just want to interject early to say that we're not going to demo building transactions through the product that we've been building. That work is currently in progress. It's a little tricky for Cardano specifically, because Cardano's concept of smart contract is not something that you can just invoke with inputs and outputs the way that Ethereum's is. It's more of a piece of validation that you run against existing transactions. It doesn't tell you how to build them. So the bulk of our engineering work is going into that build transactions part, which this demo isn't showing off yet.
Yeah, so specifically what we're going to show is if you write the code to build the Cardano transactions, you can hand the built transaction off to FireFly, and it will handle the signing and it will handle the chain events. And then we're currently building out that kind of tail half of it. So yeah, good call out, Simon. So you want to talk us a little bit through what you just clicked run on?
Yeah, just wanted to fire it off early so that it has time to complete.
Mhm.
What I'm running is our little pre-made demo, which is it's creating a transaction outside of this whole stack using the Cardano CLI. And then it's submitting that transaction through the REST APIs of the FireFly Cardano connector. And after it submits that transaction, it's using the FireFly Cardano connector's stream APIs to start listening for incoming events from the blockchain. So this is a very basic CLI tool, so it's mostly logging all of the events that it's receiving. They're in the standard format which FireFly expects its connectors to use. And you can see that after we submitted the transaction, we created 2 listeners, one for the specific transaction we created, and then one for just all transactions. And then we started listening for events. We got an event from the listener for our specific transaction saying the transaction was accepted. And now, because Cardano has more frequent rollbacks than Ethereum, we have to wait a little while longer to make sure that this transaction isn't going to get rolled back.
The way that we've mapped this concept onto Cardano is we're basically emitting roll forward and roll backward messages. So whenever Cardano undergoes a chain reorg, we kind of are keeping track of where you are in that stream, and we'll emit new events that kind of tell the application, hey, you need to undo whatever changes to state that you did in response to these blocks. And we emit those one by one. And then we'll emit the kind of appropriate roll forward messages for the other chain that we switch to. And this allows the enterprise application builder to react to that, or in this case, to wait for kind of a sufficient finality to their block or their transaction, so they can kind of choose whatever programming model makes most sense for their application.
Okay, so just a question on that one. So we have the concept of confirmations today in the EVM Connect connector, which is very similar. You're waiting
Mhm.
n amount of blocks to make sure that your transaction is actually committed and final on the blockchain. So these roll, and we actually do not mark that transaction as succeeded until we get those confirmations. So in this case, you're saying the connector is sending specific events, which are transaction scoped, I believe, these rollback events, all the way up to the consuming application to keep track if the transaction has effectively been committed to the blockchain, or you're grouping these events and then marking the transaction as succeeded once you know that you've hit that rollback horizon from the chain.
So the version that we're doing right now is it's not doing any kind of grouping. It's as soon as we see the transaction on the chain, we send the transaction accepted event. And as soon as we see it rolled back, we send a transaction rolled back event. But the version that we're building out, this demo doesn't really follow the flow that we expect people to be using. We expect people to be going through FireFly's APIs for this entire stack. And that includes using a FireFly smart contract emitting events in the standard FireFly way. And we expect to have application-specific events for if a transaction is accepted and rolled back, handled in the smart contract concept that we're building out. But yeah, we are not using the Ethereum's batch setup where it waits for it waits to be sure a transaction has been approved before it sends it out, just because in Cardano that would take too long to have decent UX.
Yeah, so just to explain a little bit about how Cardano works, in theory, the protocol allows rollbacks up to a certain number of blocks, 2,160 blocks, which equates to about, like, if you want for real finality, you have to wait 36 hours. In practice, those rollbacks are only like 4 or 5 blocks. I think the longest rollback we've ever seen is 14 blocks. So it's really only like 10 minutes, but the amount of confidence that you want is an application specific choice. And so by building these kind of underlying primitives that allow people who do care about that to see the live stream of events, of these kind of raw underlying events, then if somebody needs to, they can make those decisions, right? Oh, I'm going to wait for the full 36 hours, or I'm going to wait for 10 minutes, or whatever. And then we can build on top of that the higher level primitives with the, in the kind of invoke a smart contract, quote unquote. It will handle, waiting for that finality and emitting the confirmed application specific event for you.
Gotcha. So it feels like there is a configuration of that smart contract there that says, I want to wait X rollbacks, which might be the default for that connector. And then if you want more enhancement, you create one of these rollback listeners where you get rollback events all the way through your application. And then you can decide at which point you trust that transaction, so you can build new transaction on top of it. So just because I'm not very familiar with Cardano, maybe a little bit of context of what you're doing when you're preparing this transaction. You said there's a part today that you're using the Cardano CLI. What does it mean to prepare a transaction?
So Simon, do you want to highlight that transaction 84A3 line?
Yeah.
So these are the raw bytes of the transaction. So it's actually building and serializing the description of, here are the inputs from the wallet that we want to spend, and here are where we want to send those values. And on Cardano, smart contracts aren't because in Ethereum you would expect in there to be like a function call, right? Where you say, I'm invoking these contracts with these parameters. The way contracts work on Cardano is instead that some of those inputs you are spending may be locked by a condition, right? So for example, if I submit a DEX order, I pay into a condition that says this order can be spent either if I'm canceling it or if I'm executing that order against the DEX at this limit price. And so when invoking a smart contract is usually some combination of, spending funds that are locked under a condition or spending funds into being locked by that condition. And those concepts don't really map well onto FireFly concepts. So what we're doing instead is these underlying primitives. If you build the transaction yourself and serialize the bytes, there's an API, a REST API that you can hit to have it signed or to submit it. And then it will kind of flow through these, the event streams and the listeners to say, hey, we saw this transaction and we saw this get rolled back and things like that. The thing that we're building now is basically a WebAssembly environment where you can write application-specific code, or really a dApp can write application-specific code. So like SundaySwap, that's us, would build and kind of publish and release this WebAssembly file that includes all of the transaction building logic to do a swap on SundaySwap. And that's going to expose the kind of function call semantics that you would expect. And so then somebody using FireFly can say, hey, I just want to swap. And that is and they pass in the token they want to swap, the amount that they want to swap, the minimum price that they're going to receive, like they would on Ethereum. And under the hood, this, the FireFly engine, or the thing that we're building, the connector, will call into the WebAssembly file that you've loaded, which is kind of the moral equivalent of the, what is it called on Ethereum? The kind of JSON file that describes the contract.
The API.
The API, yeah. So it's kind of the moral equivalent of the API. It will call into that WebAssembly code, and that has access to query the ledger, and it has access to build the transaction it needs, and then return those bytes that you can then submit and get a signature and flow through the rest of the FireFly pipeline.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to be very interested in how you solve that, and we can collaborate there. So you can have a WASM runtime running in this connector where you will have different versions of different ways of building transactions, and you're translating these interfaces from specific Cardano transaction building to actual business logic that someone
Yeah.
would know how to use FireFly today.
Mhm.
Okay,
Also,
cool.
just to be clear, we're helping to build the WebAssembly runtime. It is actually an open source project that we're contributing to called Balius,
Okay.
not stealing their credit.
So yeah, we see this demo finish now. So we see like on the line, it says our transaction was accepted in block 2669789. And then we waited for 2 more kind of Cardano blocks, which happen roughly every 20 seconds. And then this got finalized. I think the version that we're showing right now, Simon is having some issue with his local Cardano node. So this may be kind of mocked out a little bit, but in practice, this would be, okay, we received a batch that told us that that 2 blocks have passed, and so that we can kind of close out and move on with our business logic.
Gotcha. Okay.
All of this is running a node on my Mac that I set up half an hour, or a node on my laptop that I set up like half an hour ago.
Okay.
So it is receiving real signals. It's just very slow for some reason.
Sounds good. Yeah, this is awesome, guys. Really enjoying this. In terms of wallet and signing features, what are you looking at here? Are you like, so I see some stuff with like dash amount, there's some balance here. Can you explain a bit of that?
Yeah, that is all part of the transaction building itself, which is eventually going to happen inside the service, but for now is just happening in the CLI script. The way that the way that signing a transaction is going to work, we're trying to model it off of the way that signing EVM transactions works. There's a dedicated signer service that the unsigned transaction is sent to, and that does the signing. And that service right now is backed by, it keeps its keys in a file wallet. We eventually want to expand that to be able to find them in more places.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so maybe we got a few folks from the Tezos here. They've decided to do a different type of signing in the Tezos connector. So they integrate with Remote Signer, which is one of the tools that Tezos has. Actually, I think it's a third-party service. Sorry. So then we can talk about different ways that you can use that file wallet signer, right? We call it FireFly Signer, which is a generic that acts when you run it locally as a proxy. But you could also have a wallet inside your connector if it's more tightly coupled to Cardano, and it's important for you to have it there.
I don't think, well, I couldn't figure out how to support HD wallets with the existing FireFly setup. I think that's a feature that we'd be interested in building out.
Okay.
It looked like that was something that whoever was setting up the node had to provide themselves. But aside from that, and I don't even think that's Cardano specific logic. I'm not super familiar with Ethereum, but I think the concept also applies there.
Yeah, HD wallets are quite used in key derivation. So yeah, that's not something that exists today in the FireFly signer. You have to pre-create the keys, and then you can add them to this file system wallet, and then they get loaded into memory for signing. Yes.
I think TX Pipe is building a tool that that kind of would serve as the spiritual equivalent of the thing from Tezos you mentioned, the Tezos signer or whatever it's called. They're building like an enterprise kind of secrets management signing infrastructure. So maybe in the future we can explore providing that as an option as well. But yeah. So I guess did you have anything else that you were gonna share, Simon?
Nothing that comes to mind right now. We
Okay.
have, I promise there is a branch where we have all of this working with FireFly CLI and setting up the entire FireFly stack, including the Cardano connector. And we're working on being able to send a transaction through it end to end, but that's not put together enough to demo yet.
Yeah. Do you want to stop sharing your screen and I'll share and walk through kind of the GitHub and show people how to get involved?
Yeah.
Awesome. That'll be great.
Cool. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let me know when you can see.
Yep.
Cool. So this is live in this Blockfrost/FireFly Cardano repo, which we just made public today. We've got kind of a basic README that walks through how you can kind of get setting it up. And it also explains kind of the architecture and kind of how the different components communicate with each other. And then just to prove Simon isn't lying, this is the branch. Balius is the project that we're working on with, the kind of open source project we're contributing to. And this is where we're doing the smart contract stuff. And then I think the Docker Compose branch we're setting up so you can just run one simple Docker Compose file.
Oh yeah, that's merged already.
Okay, cool. So it's just a branch that needs to be deleted. But
yeah, the FireFly CLI bit is in a different. It's in a fork of FireFly CLI itself.
Okay. So is that in the Blockfrost repo?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this other repo, FireFly CLI, that we've forked, and there's a branch here that we're setting up, kind of all the stuff that Simon mentioned.
Yeah, I had a look at this one and at the fork of FireFly as well, a little bit.
I accept your invitation before it expires.
The invitation has expired.
Damn it, Pi.
No worries. It's mostly important that Simon's on there because I'm just overseeing the work. But yeah, cool. Any other questions?
I think from my side, there's definitely some work that we can collaborate on how we bring this stuff into the actual Linux decentralized foundation, the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. There's a process for committing code and bringing repos into it. I think I probably will have more questions when I look at the repo and the structure, and I'm happy to do some reviews there on like where we can integrate, maybe where we can use some reusable codes, right? You guys have built all of this in Rust, and I think at the beginning we did have a chat on like we have this FireFly transaction manager engine, which is written in Golang. I know you guys have chosen Rust, which is like a really reusable piece of technology to be able to build more connectors. That's what the Tezos connector has reused, and that's what the EVM one uses. So thinking about that would be obviously a step later on for making this more reusable, and also looking at that signer piece to understand a bit more what you guys are doing there, what can be reusable, and all these things around the HD wallets will be great proposals. I think one of the things we have is a thing called Fire, F-I-R, which are FireFly improvements, like requests. So things like this wallet or things like this would be awesome to put in there so we can start a formal discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but this is
Underlying-
awesome. Really happy to see the progress.
Yeah.
One thing that would be helpful from our end is if you know anybody like that's already a FireFly customer that is interested or would be interested in kind of working on adding Cardano, they'd be really cool to kind of validate what we've done with them and kind of maybe shape some of the work that we do in the future to, it feels very uncomfortable to be building in a vacuum. So I'd love to kind of validate product market fit at some point.
Gotcha. I think one of the best ways I've seen to do this is to run some sort of webinar or workshop. And I'm happy to help you guys collaborate. We can do like a joint workshop with the LFTT where you show your Cardano connector and the value of that. Especially if you're using FireFly, maybe both communicated with Cardano and maybe another network like an Ethereum flavor, and you're changing in assets across that will really resonate a lot of these enterprise listeners to these workshops.
Cool.
Cool. Any other questions, everyone? Cool.
I did think it's worth mentioning the FireFly transaction manager library that you mentioned, the shared code which other connectors are using. I had originally built a prototype in Go that was using that transaction manager, and it turns out that it's a little lucky we aren't using it because that transaction manager is making a bunch of Ethereum-shaped assumptions. So if we can extract shared code from the FireFly connector, I think it's more likely to be chain agnostic in a way that could help future chains onboard to FireFly.
That's a great piece of feedback. I'd love to, maybe if you have time to write it down in terms of what areas of the code you struggled with, that'll improve that transaction manager to onboard new people.
Oh yeah, I can put together a list.
Sounds good. Yeah, if there are other questions, feel free to drop any links on Discord around the repos and all of that. And I'm happy to take some time looking at it. Cool. Was there anything else I had in the agenda? Any other? I'll just open it up for any other topics that people have that they want to raise. Okay, sounds like that's it. Well, thanks everyone for joining the community call this month. As usual, this recording will be posted on YouTube, so the link will be updated on the agenda page on the wiki. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Thank you
All right,
for
thanks all.
hosting.
No problem. Have a great rest of your day, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.